Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. I do appreciate you're all very, very busy people. And it's great we've had so many people actually register for today's event. It's been one of the most popular ones year to date, which is fantastic. As I say, we will be recording today's event, so smile throughout. For those that are new to Pimento, a huge welcome, especially. I'm Stephen Knight. I'm the CEO and founder of Pimento. We're an independent network of around 175 agencies and consultants, and we offer marketing services in 97 different marketing disciplines. 97, I hear you say. I didn't realize that was many. Well, they keep they keep finding new ones, so we keep trying to cover all bases. In the last 20 years, Pimento has grown out its proposition, and today we also include brand, communications, and management. We also are very actively involved in interims. So if you are either an interim yourself or you're a client that's looking for interim marketing support, do give us a call. And we also run free pitches. So again, if you're looking to run a pitch or you need some support, please let us know. Okay, that's enough of us. That's the advertising over. I'd like to just sort of ponder for a second about the rise of social media. The next hour, we're going to aim to uncover some truths, some myths, and answer some critical questions about how social media has evolved. Interestingly, in 2023, the UK social media advertising spend reached 7.7 billion in the UK alone, and that represented nearly an 8% increase over the previous year, and that trend has continued throughout this year. So it's certainly one of those sectors that is enjoying wonderful growth, and inevitably advertisers tend to navigate towards channels that are working for them. Hence, the money is piling into social. However, there's some downsides. Advertisers, I think, are finding it more difficult to stand out and to get cut through on social media. So we'll talk about that today. And obviously, competition for share of voice is becoming much harder. So I've gathered four leaders at the forefront of the development of social media, all good independent agencies, all expert in their space. And I've asked them to pop along today and actually share their wisdom with us all. First of all, we've got Nick Boddington, who's the co-founder and digital director of Let's Run Social. Let's Run Social makes social media commercially available to all businesses, regardless of their size, and they focus on delivering unparalleled results in social media advertising. Their approach is anchored in continuous research, refinement, and strategic adaptation, ensuring their clients' messages resonate with their audience on the most impactful of all platforms. Abraham Charles is the founder and CEO of Each and Everyone. Each and Everyone is a social-first global influencer agency, a collective of digital natives with an obsession for creativity. They hook up now brands with the very best and brightest influencers in the world, conceiving and executing best-in-class campaigns that resonate with an audience and translate into tangible ROI. Daniel Ray was the founder of Hydrogen. He now runs his own consultancy. He founded Hydrogen back in 2016 in Glasgow and grew that business rapidly into becoming Scotland's largest social media agency. And he's partnered with brands like OVO, SSE, Highland Park Whiskey, Ashurst, Tennant's Lager, and many, many more. He's also the judge for the Drums Global Social Media Awards, so he knows what good looks like. Faye Williams is the MD and head of strategy at Flabbergast. They're a dynamic creative agency. She co-founded Flabbergast some, I think, 5 years ago, possibly longer actually. And they are a cutting-edge social media agency and they're part of the Stacked Collective. Faye brings a wealth of experience from her work with major music and cultural brands over the last 15 years, including Universal Music, Warner Music, and more. So first of all, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here today. If we can put the team into the forefront, please, so they're all together as a collective, that'd be wonderful. And we will get going. There's almost too much to talk about today. I mean, there's so much going on in social at the moment. I found a fact last night, and this is quite scary. I had to compare it with my own consumption of TikTok. But get this, in the UK at the moment, the average TikTok user is spending 49 hours per month on the platform, which is more than any other country. My wife will testify to me I'm probably above average, which is a bit when it comes to TikTok consumption, a bit worrying. But anyway, that kind of shows you kind of how these mediums are kind of growing rapidly and how people are taking advantage of each and every one of them. Let's start with Daniel, if I may, and just give us kind of a potted history of how social media has evolved in, say, the last few years. You're on mute, sir.
Hello, sorry. Hey. Yeah, I mean, you talked about TikTok. I think that's been the biggest impact on social media in the last few years. I think it's hard to not talk about the TikTokification of social media and how TikTok has pushed short form video into the forefront. And that's why other platforms like Instagram, YouTube are copying with reels, with shorts, and so on. Even LinkedIn kind of pushing towards that short form video. And I think just that change to very short, snappy video that doesn't have to be broadcast quality, but still has to be, edited in a decent way to grab attention, has totally changed social media. I set up Hydrogen back in 2016, and it was all focused on high quality animations, graphics, those kind of things. Talk to camera, people on camera was quite rare, and now it's just the norm. So I think that has been the biggest shift for me. Don't know if fellow speakers agree or disagree with that. I'm sure there's other changes too, but I think for me that's the biggest one.
Yeah, Nick, I mean, I'll come to you, if I may. We're seeing obviously a big shift in consumer behavior and sort of talking about the short form video consumption,
Yeah.
how that's impacted. What in terms of kind of future developments, where are you seeing it? What sort of changes are you seeing coming through?
Well, we say we see it as changes. I also see it as agencies as well. We're having to really move with the times. And going on with what Dan says there is traditionally we've all gone with, your static or your animations with a chunk of copy. And we've had, even Meta 3 years ago, you could have long copy. I mean, we still use long copy in a way, but the biggest thing we're seeing, and which is where our clients find it really, really hard to adapt, is the fact that copy is kind of disappearing from a point of view of the common placements don't have enough room for copy. So if you're looking at an Instagram feed or a Facebook feed, you'd have, traditionally we know our square is there, and then above it we have our copy, and people would say you grab their attention with the static, then they'd read more about it, and then they click. Well, now if you're looking at a reel, you have 4 to 5 words, and then they have to see more. I don't think I ever click see more when I'm spending my 50 hours a month on TikTok or Reels. So we have to think about that. So creating that content now is your script, your hook, your copy is written, and then you need to create a video out of it. And then you need to think about how that video is created. And are you using content creators? Are you using influencers? The whole thing's changing. And I've been talking about this morning. And just to sort of add to that is the fact that, my age group now, it's a whole different change of the way we have to act as a consumer and an advertiser. Whereas the millennials coming in now, it's completely normal for them to put a phone to their face, talk into it, sell a product. That's just my kids do it. It's just normal. And I think the biggest thing with the businesses we deal with, it's trying to get it. It's like, no, we can't just charge you for creating some statics now. We need to charge you for making some videos. And I think that's where they're starting to go, wow, I think it's quite scary for them in actual fact of what they need to, what the amount of work, money and time and thought process they need to put into this to make it work.
Yeah, and I guess with that too is barriers to entry in the sense that if you don't have a decent sized budget, it's very difficult, I think, perhaps to
Yeah.
be successful.
A few £100, you could make some statics with some nice hooks over the top. And it's not to say that doesn't work. We still do find it all work. And I think Meta's a great platform still for statics, carousels to work. But how long will that be for before that starts disappearing?
I mean, I suppose as a bolt onto that, and you sort of touched on it, social commerce is becoming a major part of how people discover and purchase products. And, that's beginning to kind of, I guess, drive the shift in change on social. How does it sort of differ, I guess, from traditional e-commerce?
In the way that we would discover products, we'd hear about things, we'd Google it. I think the fact of people Googling a product now, unless they've seen this on social first. So that I mean, we call it a social to search, which is someone sees something on social, They see it a couple of times and they Google it. And we've been using that for about a year or two. But even now, so I can see Abraham sort of like nodding, it's going down like TikTok shops now. So going back to a user knowing how to make a video by looking at a phone, going on to the My Protein online shop, becoming a user where they can actually get a commission from selling that product, they're just going to keep firing it. And I read a stat the other, well, it wasn't so much a stat, but it was basically there's a lot of kids making a lot of money from getting commission of selling other people's products. Meta missed out on this in the last 5 years with their shops. I don't think their shops have really taken off at all. You link it to a catalog and that's about it. TikTok are taking it to another level. And our generation needs to really catch up with it. Otherwise, we're going to kind of get left behind because these content creators are going to be the next generation of creating big companies.
Yeah, that's a massive shift, isn't it? Too. I mean, Abraham, do you think that's a natural evolution, or is there a risk of alienating users?
It is a natural evolution. I just had a conversation yesterday with a client over in Dubai about how we can leverage influencers and talent to own their own IP and create their own ecosystem to a P&L sheet and a business model for long-term longevity. Because end of the day, we don't know how long they're going to last for. They've got an opportunity, a window of opportunity at the moment to maximize what they can do. So at the moment, just going back to the searchability, it's all about we're finding that influencers need to be promoting your product on these social platforms to then drive awareness for then people to go onto Google and actually search it. So there's that issue at the moment that we're having in terms of driving awareness on social, but any drop off, how do we calculate that into the ROI as well? And then ultimately, another client of mine yesterday was saying, look, you're great at creating awareness. It's now about integrating the USPs authentically into the content and the scripted, and how do we get that through seamlessly as well. So we've got a creative session this afternoon to work out. Yeah, it's all about driving awareness, but how do we create that narrative, authentic narrative into the creative without pushing it into somebody's face really aggressively. So that's another things that people are struggling with at the same time. They're wanting multiple KPIs to drive the ultimate ROI return, unfortunately. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, dropping kind of obviously, key sales points into communications is obviously something we've done forever. The issue is making it authentic and believable and not feel placed, which is challenging. Faye, can I come to you? On that point, as you see brands leveraging this combination of social interaction and online shopping, how are you advising your clients and how are you working with that combination of essentially creating an social interaction and at the same time imparting knowledge and selling stuff?
Yeah, so I think, times have really changed over the last 5 years. When you were having a pitch conversation or a briefing conversation with a client about a social media strategy, it would just be creating content to build your audiences and then hopefully drive people to your website or your music streaming or wherever to drive some results. But there's a whole other element in between that now, which is, creating the content on TikTok, Instagram, whatever platform, so that you can then also maybe engage influencers, have them creating content for your platform and on their platforms to then drive to your products on the platform. Selling products, they can earn commission as well. So there's a whole affiliate scheme to manage too. And then, eventually driving people towards the end goal. But I think it's a huge opportunity and it's not a bad thing, but it is a lot for brands to be able to understand in terms of the sheer work that needs to go into that, but also the thought and the strategy and the time and the budget as well.
So, I mean, taking that point in hand, I mean, obviously it all starts with insight. It starts with targeting and understanding who you're trying to reach, and then finding the most cost-effective ways to reach that audience. When you are planning a campaign on behalf of one of your clients, Faye, and obviously you cover, I think, a multitude of different audiences, or you're taking over a social account, where do you start as an organization?
Yeah, so we take a real step back and start with the audiences and the aspirational audiences who the brands want to be connecting with, and then the existing audiences as well, how we can really nurture who we've already got and make them feel, you know, part of a community and make them feel invested in the brand too. So yeah, it's we're AI powered, so we use that to really dig deep into a lot of our insights and strategies, but a lot of it is, you know, being conscious of current trends as well. And sometimes when you work with a brand, they think their audience is a particular thing, and then you get into it and it's actually not. So I think we always start there just because it's worth the time investment, so that, you know, when you are going into these social media messaging plans, into your content shoots, you're building out your, you know, content formats and series, you do know that what you're spending your time shooting and your resource, which is expensive now, is the right thing that you're shooting. And you're also able to, you know, shoot as much as possible in a short amount of time, so that you've got as much content banked, so that you do have that consistent flow going out as well.
Thank you. And as obviously one of the routes in there is through influencers, Abraham. It strikes me, and kind of the point was made a little earlier, if you kind of expand upon this, is that getting that kind of authenticity between the commercial messaging and actually working with influencers, I think it's getting harder, because I think the customers rather, or viewers, or whatever you want to call them, consumers, they're getting more cynical and they're more skeptic about it. So how do you breed into your influencers authenticity, and how do you get them to work with brands in a way that actually feels right?
I think from our perspective, it's all about the analysis phase within our process. Understanding what the brand's values are and what their business goals are, looking at the competitive analysis landscape, and then working backwards and identifying somebody who actually fits those core key pillars. And then making sure that over the period of the last 6 months, obviously they've not worked with any competitive brands, but the creative output that they are currently doing does feel authentic to what they're trying to promote in the long run. And then obviously trying to go on a longer term length of contract rather than a short-term win. So over a period of 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, where we can intertwine a narrative over a longer period of time, so it feels a bit more authentic, than rather than just shoehorned into a campaign and it's just right at the forefront of somebody's feed with the brand messaging. So I think we try and look at long-term narratives rather than short-term wins to get around the authenticity.
Thank you. Let's change gear and talk about tech and how that's beginning to impact. You spoke earlier on about using AI in targeting and being able to determine who the right influencers are. How else is AI, AR, VR being used on this particular platform? One for you, Faye.
Yeah, so we were chatting, weren't we, about all of the different ways AI is useful for us in social media, but also quite scary. So I think from Flabbergast, we've made a real conscious effort to explore all of our options in terms of AI tools out there, or tools which are already integrated into platforms that we use. So that we can, you know, save time where we can for our teams, our creatives, and they can spend that time investing more into creative ideas and having a look at results and adapting the strategies from there. But I think also, as I mentioned before, AI is just great for really being able to dig into stats and insights and, you know, explore more ideas as well. I think, we have a huge stack of tools that we use here at Flabbergast. But if you are just starting off and, you know, admittedly haven't really used AI a lot, I think a good place to start is having a look at the tools that you do already use and see what the AI integrations are there, such as Canva Pro. Hootsuite have a great AI integration, which delivers results for like conclusions for your reports pretty quickly, which saves a lot of time. And there's quite a lot of kind of specific tools for AI content creation now as well. For example, you know, even in the planning and pitching process, we can create easily create images with AI to really explain some of our ideas to our clients, which saves a lot of time rather than having to, send it to a designer, work with them on a brief, and they have to create that image, hopefully to the best that we hope as well. And I think in terms of, AR as well, people think that it's probably quite expensive, but there's a lot of great people on Fiverr. If you have an idea, you can start there as well.
Thank you. I mean, the other thing we're seeing obviously is a shift towards actually kind of avatars as influencers, and actually that kind of the narrowing between reality and virtual reality. If we come back to the idea of authenticity, I guess avatars ultimately are the least likely to be authentic advisors on a brand, yet somehow consumers are engaging with them, and they are being invested in because people are spending, well, you can see it, every time you go online, and it's questionable actually to be able to tell the difference sometimes. Is that something, Abraham, that you are involved in? Do you represent any avatars? Are there new influencers that are coming up in the world of 3D?
I don't represent any avatars, but I am going through the process of working with a startup company to license people's images and turn them into avatars at the moment. Obviously, for multiple jurisdictions and geos, it's a lot easier to get an influencer to create a piece of content and then replicate it into different languages and to scale quite quickly. But at the moment, I'm finding there's a lot of issues around the laws and regulations, which I need to be really on top of at the moment. And I'm a bit scared in terms of what direction we need to go in. So at the moment, we're just building the tech onto a blockchain platform so that we can actually identify who the originator is. And then if it gets replicated in other jurisdictions, who the actual owners are, and the IP revolves around. So yeah, unfortunately, it's where the tech is heading. The industry is heading also. I think it's a good thing as long as it's monitored in the right way. And I also think it's a good thing as long as when it's used according to the ASA standards or advertising standards, that people actually point out this is an AI avatar, so that people are aware of what type of content it is, so that they make up their own jurisdiction and information. So yeah, I'm treading lightly. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's the future because of all the different platforms. We're only going to advance further and further.
Yeah, I think it raises all sorts of kind of issues, doesn't it? Not least of which, obviously, you say through licensing, the issue of voice, this issue of replicating somebody's visual image and then obviously manipulating that and using it to sell products. It's going to be a bit of a minefield for a while.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is why in many instances, obviously, brands are creating their own avatars rather than copying existing or people who were existing but are no longer with us, and trying to create something that's unique and different. So I think that we'll have to see how that plays out, but I think it's a very interesting way to actually create cut through. And I think one of the challenges as this whole area expands is using creativity to be able to actually create cut through. I'd like to come back to both Nick and Daniel on that point. How do you encourage clients to basically be more creative, to take more risks, to try new things in order to get that cut through?
From my point of view, I've got a number of clients that really need to go down that route. It's the fear of the unknown. It's like we've all been doing something. I mean, I think the shift in the last 18 months has been the biggest shift in years. I mean, so people adapting into social media, Facebook advertising, etc., going back to like doing statics and stuff. It was all kind of normal. Even if you think of like placing an ad in a newspaper or a magazine, taking that to social media wasn't really that much difference. You've still got an image. You can still put some text over the top of that image with a bit of a hook and an offer, have some text going along with it. But now, like from what I'm listening to on this, it's like it's really, really jumping forward really quickly. And I think, honestly, in an agency, we're also having to try and play catch up, and that's our field. I have conversations daily with members of staff. I've had one with a member of staff who's managing my own social content, and I'm making excuses as a 45-year-old guy saying, that's not my thing. I don't put a phone to my face, blah, blah. So I went down the route of podcasting. So for the last few years, it's been podcasts, and you can take a podcast, you can take snippets from that podcast, have it filmed, and you can create, using the AI that Faye was talking about, so certain platforms, very cheaply, you can create hundreds of different additions to those snippets. Change the text, change the hooks, everything. You can get those out. Is it enough? Not really. It probably gives you a presence, but I think you've got to create that content. And even myself as an individual who owns an agency, I have to practice what I preach to get the message across of trying to grow my brand, trying to grow the agency, etc. Trying to get that into a large company that has its red tape in there. The biggest thing has been trying to get through that red tape. We're slowly, with one particular company, we're slowly getting there. But I think it's the fact of you don't know what's still going to work. You can put your 3 minutes, you hook in the first 3 seconds of a hook of a video, or the first 5 seconds. You can keep it moving. This one particular client has created 5. One's worked, 4 aren't working. We have to look at republishing that in different ways. And I think with the cost that comes from producing those sort of video content, to a client signing it off and then wanting its ROI immediately, I think that's what they're really finding hard. It's the amount of content you need to produce, it's the cost of that content to produce, and then finding one that the ROI works. Another example is a consumer e-commerce brand that I've got, which is to do with facial. And she's got a video that has had 11.5 million views organically. So she's got a large following. She's got a great product. Now, when I'm following what's going on in the marketplace, I'm seeing people say, see what works organically and stick it and put paid behind it. Well, we've been doing this for a month with this one particular video, and we can't get it to get any traction or any return on investment whatsoever. So even we, and I think it probably speaks for all of us, even we are finding the amount of things that you have to try and figure out and learn whilst getting an ROI for your client and making money for your own agency to make it work. It's a hard place. I think everyone agrees. It's
no, again, to you, Nick, I do agree with that, but I think it's a part of an education process when you've got a client who's asking for immediate ROI and explaining to them, actually, you need to look at the long game instead of a short-term win. Again, I've got another client who I've got to speak to this afternoon, and he's a new product to the market. His price point is very high, and I'm saying to him, although you don't need external resources to actually deliver this service that you're giving, why don't you drop down your price points and flood the market with your product? But again, it's an education piece, unfortunately.
I completely agree. But it's how long. I think when I sit in the meetings and have these discussions, it's all great, isn't it? When you're in the creative mode and it's all there, it's on a whiteboard. And then they're like, yeah, we'll go with that, we'll go with that. And then they look at someone in the business, then goes, how come you spend 40,000 doing that in ROI? We've done 10,000 in return on something. It's how long do you give something? I think that's what's finding it hard. I think we've come from a traditional advertising route where that ROI is a lot quicker.
Okay. Well, I mean, to be fair, yeah, there's a number of clients on this call. The reality is obviously that they turn to agencies like yours in order to understand exactly what it can achieve and what it can't achieve. But the reality is there's been such a focus on the bottom end of the funnel because, let's be honest, business has been tight in the last 18 months, and brands like everyone else, are struggling and they need to obviously get a return on investment. And there's been such a shift in spend from Google into social media. I think there's an expectation, like PPC, that it will actually deliver in the same way, and it doesn't work in the same way. So I think there's an education to be done, and there's an understanding to be shared that there is a role for social media, mid-funnel, top of funnel in terms of brand awareness, brand building, building that confidence, building that trust. And yes, of course, it will have a demonstrable effect on selling stuff, but it needs to be actually considered in the round, and you need to be actually taking and creating content that basically leverages different parts of that funnel. I mean, with that in mind, and kind of come back to you, Daniel, do you believe that social media is still the most cost-effective way to reach new audiences?
Yeah, I think so. I think it definitely is, compared to advertising on TV, buying up billboards and stuff like that. I think social media is a cheaper alternative, and it gives you targeting options to target the right people, the right demographics, rather than just hitting anyone who passes by a billboard in the street or sees a bus driving past, etc. So I think it's the most targetable and probably most cost-effective route. But you shouldn't just use social if there are other routes to you. Get other options available to you. But social should be in the mix for sure. It has got more expensive, and Nick will probably testify to that too. Costs are going up. It's harder and harder to hit the right people because there's more and more competition. But there are lots of options out there, and it doesn't just have to be Meta. TikTok has cost-effective options if that's your audience there. There's options on Reddit. You can look slightly beyond social into things like Spotify, etc. too. So there's lots of things out there to look at, but I still think it's the most cost-effective way.
So just for a second, and tell us a bit more about Reddit and how that works, and also Reddit rather, and Spotify, and equally too. Obviously, we've seen a massive amount of money shift into YouTube.
Yeah, I think it's easy to just think of Facebook. Let's advertise on Facebook. Let's do Meta ads, and traditionally they would pop up on Instagram and so on, and that makes sense. But the depends on your audience. So there's no one size fits all for any company. If you're in quite a niche space, then yeah, is there an active community on Reddit? If there is, then could you advertise there, for example? YouTube's great. Spotify's great as well. It's a tricky one because I pay for the ad-free versions of both, so I don't really consume the ads on those platforms very much. But they can work well, and I've had some success targeting Spotify to certain regions and certain demographics too. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Try multiple platforms that make sense, and then narrow it down and find the best route that works for you. And I'm sure you'll agree with that.
There's obviously a lot of, I guess, moving elements here, isn't there? You've got to think about the channel, got to think about the content. You've got to look at every piece of content and see how that's impacting, whether it's giving you a return on investment if you're judging it in that manner, and then refine. And then, of course, like all these things, you then choose a piece of content that comes left of field and it just catches fire. And then you have to start the whole process again to understand exactly why that piece of content has actually resonated with that audience and gone viral, which of course we all want. So in planning then, so from a planning point of view, obviously it starts from determining who your audience is, working out the right channels, and then testing. In terms of content creation, is there a trend towards client and agency creating content themselves rather than one partner externalizing everything? We've now seen more content created by clients and then agencies basically filling in gaps, or does it tend to be now more outsourced to agencies? And that's for anyone.
I think from my perspective, with utilizing influencers, we're getting them to obviously create the content and then obviously repurposing it and passing some of the content onto the clients to use for their ad purposes. So it gives it more value. And again, we've had another client this morning come to us and says, look, we need to produce more content based on the deliverables that we've got. So I think we've mentioned before the use of AI and repurposing the assets so that you're changing the format and the structure of the content from the hooks and the CTAs and making sure that you capture people's attention within the first 3 seconds. So we are finding more and more clients asking for us to produce content, but again, it's at a cost to us and not to them. So we are trying to add a bit of added value where we can.
Okay. And if we talk about sort of what I call sort of vanity metrics, how do we kind of basically get people to actually say, well, actually, these are the sorts of metrics that one should be tracking. These are the ones that you don't really need to worry about. And again, that's for anyone.
Sorry, go on, Faye. You go.
Nick. Yeah, I think particularly we were speaking about the engagement rate on TikTok, which is reduced by 40% over the last year. I think it is down to 3.3%. So it's tough out there, it really is. But I think there's also some other metrics which are really good to have a look at, which are the share amounts on your content and saves as well, because that's really showing, in terms of anti-social social, people are less likely now to comment and tag their friends on a post. They're more likely to send it to them, to their inbox, where they can have a private conversation about whatever it is, negative or positive or neutral. So yeah, I think it's also really useful to have a look at all of those other metrics, which are given a good indication of consumption and engagement as well.
Okay.
Sorry,
go on, please.
I also think we're in a world where we've been using followers as a metric, and we still have businesses ask us, can we get this amount of followers? This is our target, but it's so hard to grow followers now. Going with what Faye was saying, it's just a shift towards that people with TikTok, it's all video reels, it's all about video views. So the shares and the tags and things like that are really helping to grow following, but it comes back down to the content. We've noticed that Instagram is sending more and more posts into people's feeds about something you may be interested in. So Instagram are really starting to see the drop off of followers on accounts, and people just aren't growing. So they're actually really trying to push their platform now to say, hey, you might be interested in this, you might be interested in this, to get you to start following back. But I think that, you know, the younger generation now, they're just not following things as much. I mean, if I think about how I use both platforms, I don't follow anything on TikTok. TikTok's algorithm to me is so good that the minute I've spent 3 seconds on something, I see all that person's content without following them. And I think Meta are in a very much a catch up of, I think they're in the back end, even though they're as an advertising platform, I love it. I still think it really works. We use lots, we get great results from it. I think they're panicking at the background to where TikTok's really taking itself and how the consumers are moving over. I spend most of my time consuming content in TikTok now, opposed to Meta. But that said, as an agency, the results we get are from Meta, opposed to others.
Okay, I guess it depends upon the products and services. Can we just go back to someone mentioned the word antisocial? Daniel, can you just explain to us, unpack that concept of antisocial? What does it mean?
Yeah, I'll try anyway. So social media traditionally is a public thing, so people see your likes, see your comments, they see what you do. Facebook was built that way, but the shift has been more towards private groups, conversations. So, I mean, does anyone here really post on Facebook updates about what they're eating or what they're watching on TV? I don't think many people do. But if I look back 10 years ago, what I did on Facebook, it's quite embarrassing. And that's the sort of thing you did back then, maybe even 15 years ago. But what we are seeing is we're finding interesting content, something that's funny, something that's interesting, and sharing it maybe on Facebook Messenger, maybe WhatsApp group, maybe somewhere else. So we're taking content that is public and discussing it privately. And that's happening more and more. And you can see that's evidenced by Twitter recently decoupling messaging from the main platform. So they're trying to create X, Twitter, it's hard to call it X. They're trying to create a messaging platform. Messenger has always been slightly separate to Facebook. WhatsApp's really powerful. Lots of people are in WhatsApp groups. So that's the shift, which is, it's natural. It makes sense. It's a good thing to do, but it's hard to track. And as advertisers, as agency owners and so on, it's hard to track what happens when things go dark and go into this kind of dark social space. But that's a trend. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
I was just going to say we work with a lot of artists, music artists and individuals as well. And I think it can be quite overwhelming for them because people have been messaging them a lot more, and they feel the need to, you know, really have this personal relationship with their audiences to be able to maintain the engagement. So I think it's the same for brands as well. Just, you know, really having an audience strategy and a community strategy, as well as just your output of one way of social media content as well.
When we talk about anti-social media, obviously inevitably we start to think about how algorithms contribute to polarizing audiences, you know, and creating echo chambers. And that's inherent, I guess, in the algorithms within all of the social media platforms. And we have seen that, and we're not going to talk about politics today, but it has obviously spilled over into politics across very many regions in Europe and elsewhere around the world. And also within fan bases of a particular artist or a particular movement, you know, we see that happen all the time. That kind of one-sided perspective on a particular given subject can cause obviously all sorts of cultural and social issues, and it can sort of whip up all sorts of problems. Is there not a obligation, I guess, amongst the social media platforms to actually be, obviously they're aware of it, but equally too, to help advise their audiences and make them aware of different sides to the story? And that's just, again, a sort of general question for anyone, really. So it's more of an ethical question, also a technical question.
I think from my perspective, yeah, they are responsible for it, but it's how do you outline what is a true story and what's not a true story? You need to go back to the source and pinpoint who's actually creating that narrative. and make them responsible. Technically, anything's doable, but it's whether or not the platforms are going to make commercial revenue from it. End of the day, it's about dollar signs for them, and if it gets people actively, talking about on the socials in a negative or positive way, it's then collecting data out there about those personalities and those individuals, where they can then start targeting other ad formats. But yeah, ethically, I think it's wrong. Just from my point of view, I'd like to see true storylines on the platforms, but you're never going to get away from the negativity, are you? No matter what walk of life you're in. There's somebody at the school gate slagging another kid off for wearing crap trainers. So if it's been done in the playgrounds, it's going to be definitely done on the social media platforms.
Yeah, it just amplifies those issues, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's young people in particular, obviously, who are particularly vulnerable to these sort of negative effects of social media. I mean, it's largely very positive. It's brilliant at informing people. It's helpful. It's educational and so on. But obviously, inevitably, like any channel, and it was the same with television. It was the same with certainly print. You do have to recognise that misinformation and not having a balanced view can actually impact upon how people behave, and that's particularly important. Okay, what I want to do now, if it's okay, is to open up to questions from our audience. One of the things we were talking about the other day was the fact that there's bot activity and how that is also both driving performance and being perhaps misinterpreted at times by audiences. I know it's something that, particularly obviously when you're buying audiences in any particular media, bot activity can actually give you an overstatement of how effective you are or otherwise. And I just wanted to kind of understand, perhaps Nick, from you, is how do you advise clients and how do you cope with that sort of problem?
I knew you'd pick on me. So it's because I've been ranting so much. So we're finding a shift. We're e-commerce is one of our things, and we're very big in lead generation, especially B2B. And we've been doing this for years and years. I have background in databases, so it's an understanding of where this is coming from. But in the last, I would say, a year, we've seen a big shift with problems with bots on the platforms. So when we're trying to collect, one thing that's happened since iOS 14 and happened a couple of years ago, which is basically Apple not reporting its tracking back to the social platforms, the social platforms had to have a big shift. So what we'd generally do is we'd send someone out of platform to a landing page for a business, and someone fill in a form with their email address and details, and that would be a lead for the company. Since iOS, the platforms have had to really pull this back into platform, and they've used autofill, which is great. It saves time for a consumer. We're in a very, very fast moving world now where a consumer has about half a second to make any decision they do in life. And an autofill form's great. And what we're finding with a lot of our clients is that over 50% of those form fills is now fake data. So, people who are putting this straight into an email database to do email marketing with probably aren't seeing the effects that quickly. But when you have clients who have a sales team who are reporting immediately, a lead drops in and it's coming back saying this person I didn't fill this lead in, or the information's wrong, or the email's bouncing, telephone was wrong. It's a big problem which is affecting the platforms. The platforms are fine because they're essentially getting the vanity metrics of people clicking through and taking actions on this. But as a business, we're seeing a lot of hits from it. So we still don't really understand how to get around this, because there is additional questioning you can ask on a form to knock these bots out. But we're moving effectively, even though Meta would be saying, use us for our forms, they're amazing. We're actually going against the grain and going back to the old school of sending people out of platform to landing pages and relying on capture to get robots out. The lead costs are going up, but the quality is getting back there. But you're having to explain to a client that their leads are 50% down unless they spend more money. So it's a hard one, because I know of people out there who specialize in bots, and it is a problem. I think it's figuring out a way that makes it affordable for small to medium-sized businesses to jump on and have their bots cleaned by putting extensions on URLs and things like that of landing pages and things. But we're finding it's a big problem.
Nigel, can I bring you in? Because this is something that you, as a business, have been focused on for a number of years, which is trying to find ways in which you can, both on advertising spaces and also on websites, reduce bot activity and spot bot activity before it actually gets counted as a hit by Google or anyone else. To Nick's point, it's now getting so sophisticated, and actually the leads that are coming in very often look authentic. I mean, we had one week or so ago, a Pimento from a client that basically was interested in a marketing campaign where we're making inquiries for a luxury jewel manufacturer based in France, and it all looked very credible. And when we dug a bit deeper, we found out about a dozen agencies that also had the same conversation, and also the telephone number was a fake. So it happens at every level. How do you deal with this with your tech?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It really does. The old way of going, oh, has it come from a certain IP address? Yeah, what's the browser signature? All that kind of stuff doesn't cut any credence anymore. What we've had to do is look at the micro behaviors of the visit to go, is it really a human, or is it a clever bot pretending to be a human? Which you can only do at the browser. So you can only do it, browser on your phone or what have you. And we're finding bots really are getting very, very sophisticated at doing this. Yeah, the business case for somebody writing a sophisticated bot is very positive. So it's not going to go away as a problem. And what we've had to do is try to work out, how do you differentiate and differentiate between a bot and a human, and how do you do it really quickly and really cheaply so that you can discard that visit, not count them, not let the vulnerability in, and move on to the humans. It's taken a long time to get to that point, but I think we're there. I mean, Nick's point just now about relying on capture and how do you make this kind of stuff affordable. That's the journey we've been on for a couple of years now, because this stuff is hard. Yeah, this is kind of deep tech stuff. My word of warning for those that rely on capture is just be slightly careful on capture, because it obviously puts friction in the way, because people hate clicking on boxes or telephone boxes or whatever they are. But also remember, capture itself is owned by Google. They are collecting data for their own means. And also I've come across software that very easily that can circumvent capture. So you've kind of got to be really careful on these things. And those bot detection mechanisms that still work in the server or the CDN, bots are getting around them now. Bots are just getting around them. Stephen, I don't know whether that helps answering the question.
No, it does. Thank you very much indeed, Nigel. And I'll
Stephen,
drop your
can
details
I
if
ask
I may
Nigel a
into
question?
the chat.
Can I ask Nigel a question on that? Which I think
Yeah.
everyone know. Nigel, from a point of view of being on Meta or on another platform, when a form gets filled, autofill, why is that happening? What's the user case? That's why I get asked the most, of why it's been a fake lead.
Oh gosh, lots of different reasons. I tell you, in the sense, the obvious one is, the 17-year-old college kid in his bedroom just writes a bot just for the sheer hell of it, because they're learning how to do this. Yeah, and you're always going to get that. You're always going to get the vandal that wants to throw a brick through a stained glass window just because he does. But what we're seeing is people are now writing bots because there is a use case behind it. Let's say, let's come up with something. Let's say you're trying to break in, I don't know, break into a bank to steal the money. The old way of turning up the crowbar and a shotgun just doesn't work. So you're going to do it electronically. And so bank systems are now very sophisticated. When you, as a user, log onto your bank account, they're not just looking to see who you are, they're looking at your history, they're looking at all sorts of things. What criminal gangs are now doing is they're writing bots simply to develop breadcrumbs of a visit history for a fake visitor, so that they can then use that visit history for their own nefarious means. And unfortunately, in building up that visit history, your website is one of the things that they've clicked on.
Yeah, so it's digital stalking.
Yeah. And in a sense, you're just a victim of circumstance.
Yeah.
You're collateral damage in somebody else's battle. But if you think of the number of people that are writing bots trying to break into all sorts of stuff they're doing, that's collateral damage. is huge. It's vast. So they're not necessarily targeting you. They just happen to click on you because you're part of their business plan for targeting somebody else.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Nigel. If you could, Teresa, please put Nigel's details in the chat box. If anybody's interested in following up with him directly about the tech and what he's doing in that space, that'd be great. I'll go to Julie Davison. Julie, you asked a question earlier on regarding influencers, so I'm going to ask Abraham this one, if I may, which is, how do you see the role of influencers evolving in high trust and regulated categories like healthcare and financial services?
Oh God, yeah. I'm in that sector at the moment. It's an absolute nightmare because there's so much red tape that you have to adhere by. But we've got a brief on the table. I think I spoke about earlier on about how we create an authentic narrative and bring in the USPs of the client's products to actually showcase what they actually do. And again, I'll say it's about creating a long form strategy. Because it's a lot easier to intertwine different concepts of the USP. So it may, for example, gambling sector, gambling responsible, not showcasing that the influencer is promoting the need to gamble and that they're getting a big hit of adrenaline from taking part in that gambling, making sure that the narrative and the content showcases that they have to take breaks and time out and set limits and things like that. So over a longer period of time, you can actually decipher what key USP points that you need to actually drop into the conversation as the journey moves forward. If that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking as well, having worked quite a lot in wealth management recently, and a lot of the conversations, say around crypto, for example, where there's obviously finfluencers or whatever they're called, who are making a lot of money out of it, and arguably, not necessarily spreading, not necessarily sharing informed information.
Well, we've done in that category as well, and we've actually not used the traditional influencers per se, the finfluencers. We've gone down the route of, it might be, I think we used a mummy blogger about her having a spare bit of change and how she could potentially try and earn some wins. But on the flip side, we actually showed that she lost the money instead. So we showed the negative parts of it rather than what everybody thinks will be the positive side of it. So we try not to go down the route, but it's a part of the analysis phase of understanding who the audience is and who you want to try to attract as well. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but it's a nightmare, unfortunately, those industries, because there's so much red tape that you've got to adhere by.
Okay, I've got a question here from Harry Heath. If you could, thank you very much indeed. Can you ask a question? Because to be honest, it was beyond me. So I want you to ask this one because I think it's quite an interesting question and I didn't fully understand it.
Thank you. So I saw this term in an Instagram comment and I was like, oh, this was like the perfect way to describe it, of what we're seeing, where it's a bit of unhinged corporate brands on Instagram and TikTok. And I feel like it started with Wendy's and then it went to McDonald's. Now, a lot of brands pretty much have that sort of like Gen Z, millennial tone of voice. They're always commenting on the brands. They're always trying to have that bit of an edgy tone of voice. And recently, one brand that seems to have gained a lot of traction online is one called Nutter Butter. And its whole aesthetic is completely different and it's bizarre almost, so to speak, because the aesthetic that it's created is almost just like that YouTube deep cut, like the weird side of the internet. But then it's got such a high amount of engagement all over all of its socials. And it feels like it's rewriting that little book on how to engage with like Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And I'm curious what your thoughts on this, and is this going to stay as the norm for like brands in terms of how they communicate with their target audience online? And what's kind of like the line with all of this, where it starts to get a bit like repetitive and even demonly a little bit cringy, as you're seeing some brands really try and go down this route? Like, when does actually this stop feeling authentic?
Okay. Daniel and Faye, I'm going to put this one both to you, if I may.
Yeah,
sure.
I think
You go first, Ben.
Oh, thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I think from a social media point of view, it's probably going to stop when people stop getting results. If it's getting results for a brand and it's cost effective and it's, it's driving even, press attention, people will continue to do it. But I think consumers, are wise to these tactics and inauthenticity. And if they've seen someone do it and it's novel and it's, new, they'll probably be, engaging with that. But if they start to see it repeatedly, I think people will start to disengage with that, and brands are going to need to find another trick to engage with those audiences. But I see there's a question there also around, the controls for teenagers that they're bringing into the meta ads as well. And I think it's probably quite similar, like, teenagers and the Gen Zs and the alphas are probably most aware of these tactics and most aware of ads out of, maybe all of the audiences. So I actually just think it goes back to just being organic and original to be able to stay ahead of those trends.
Yeah, Lisa had a similar question, which is Instagram teen controls. I'm sorry, Daniel.
No, I was just going to say I agree. I think it's that way that social media is quite saturated. It's hard to get attention and grab attention in your audience. So that's why brands like Wendy's and stuff are being a bit crazy and doing things that stand out. You're not going to win awards for putting out bland content. So being brave can get results. But that whole risk reward thing to, is it right for your brand? You're not going to see, I guess, traditional banks or energy companies doing wacky things on TikTok to grab attention, because it doesn't feel right. It's not their brand, and people don't expect that or want that, I don't think. But if you want to stand out and grab attention on social, sometimes the way to do it is to be unique and novel and try something a bit different. But it's not for everyone. And there's a danger to it as well, where if you do something that is too out there that annoys people or is inauthentic or offensive, then there's reputational risk that can come with it too. So it's a brave brand that goes down that route, but sometimes the rewards are amazing. But yeah, I think Faye's right. It's probably the younger demographic and the teenagers, and even the kids that are seeing these adverts. I mean, I see it myself. My kids are singing the We Buy Any Car song because it's on TV all the time. So that they're easily influenced. So there's a danger there, and that's where there's a whole other debate and conversation about protocols and safety for kids and teenagers on social. But that's for another day, I think.
Thank you, Daniel. Harry, great question. Thank you very much indeed. We are, unfortunately, rapidly getting towards midday. I just wanted to thank all of our panelists for today's conversation. I think we could probably go on talking about this for ages. Lots to discuss. Thank you to all of you who took time out to join us. Hopefully we answered some of the questions that were raised prior to today. If we haven't answered your questions, and if you've still got some questions, then just drop me a line. I'll point you in the right direction. Let's keep the conversation going. For those of you who are in the Bath area, tomorrow night, the Pimento 6 p.m. club is down in Bath tomorrow at a Pimento agency called Mostly Media. If you live within striking distance, you are all welcome. Just drop me a line at Stephen, that's with a ph.knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, at pimento.co.uk. And thank you very much. Have a great rest of the week, and hope to see you all soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.